Good evening and welcome to Real Talk with Marcus McCoy, and we are back at you with another one. I'm your host, Marcus McCoy, and on today's show, we're going to be talking about different aspects of relationship, whether it be dating, significant other, marriage, and also, the perspective of parent-child relations. And before we dive into that, I also want to send a special shout out to everybody who's liking and subscribing. All the feedback on the channel is greatly appreciated. We can't grow and we can't do what we do without having you guys support. So we definitely thank you for that. Now we want to introduce our guest. Her name is Mrs. Shearon Parham. She is an actress and a motivational speaker. And when you guys get a chance to, she's also going to tell you where you can follow her. But I looked at her podcast and man, it's very inspirational. So we'd like to welcome you to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. As you indicated, my name is Shearon Parham, and I have over 25 years of experience in corporate America. However, I am now a certified life coach, and I specialize in grief, where I take people from hurting to healing, as well as I assist those that are struggling with confidence, help them to gain back their confidence, and just start living life again.
Okay. Where can you be followed at if you don't mind putting it out?
Oh, sure. I can be found on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at SD Parham 2000. You guys go like and follow me and share whatever you see out there. I'm sure there's some information out there that will be helpful to you all.
Definitely. So we're gonna dive right into it. Of course, I compiled a list of questions so we can, just get your feedback and the feedback of the viewers. So first, we're gonna start off with when it comes to dating or being in a marriage, right? What do
Sure.
you what makes a good relationship when it comes to dating, in your opinion?
In my opinion, what makes a good relationship is transparency and honesty. I think a lot of times people go into relationships with expectations, but are not communicating their true expectations. So if you say what you mean and mean what you say, then we're all on the same page and there shouldn't be any issues. When we're transparent and upfront about whatever it is that we're feeling, thinking, or saying, I believe in saying what you mean and mean what you say. So there's no confusion, no conflicts, none of that. It just eliminates all of those things.
Okay, for me, what I put, what makes a good relationship when it comes to dating, we're kind of like on the same page. One of the first things I put was communication,
Mhm.
and I also put honesty, which goes along with what you said too. I think a lot of times in relationships, people want you to be mind readers, or
Yeah.
or they expect you to know what they think in general, and that's just not necessarily the case. Which comes in the communication standpoint, you have to tell your partner, your significant other, how you feel about certain issues, and that way, either they can adjust to it, or they'll value those type of things. But I feel like a lot of times people don't actually, like you said, say what they mean. They want you to guess, or they dance around the issue instead of just telling the significant other what's wrong. And
Yeah.
it kind of goes back to to honesty as well. I
Yeah.
believe in you. If you're gonna be with somebody, to an extent, I would say you gotta be an open book, especially if you're gonna gain that relationship and have that trust. Um, my next question is, now this is a interesting question, but why do you feel like people cheat in relationships?
Oh, now you trying to get me in trouble, Marcus?
No, no,
See?
no, no.
Well, I
I'm
feel
not
like
trying to get you
people.
in trouble.
I feel like people. A lot of people's not gonna like this answer, but truth of the matter is, people cheat simply because they want to.
I agree with
There's
that.
there's no getting around that. You may people may use things to justify why they're cheating, but they cheat because they want to. At the end of the day, like we just said, if you're having those open and honest conversations about what you're looking for, what you want, what your expectations are, then you should be getting what you want in the relationship. A lot of time it's just simply greed, you know. And I don't want to just say men, but because I'm a woman, I'll say men. See another woman that they may think is, you know, got this banging body and is just super fine. And, you
Mm-hmm.
know, they want to chase, you know, what they want to chase that person. But at the end of the day, I can be in a marriage, in a relationship, or whatever the circumstances are, and be providing, doing everything that I could possibly do in this relationship and give all that I have to give. But if somebody wants to do something, they're going to do it because they want to.
Now, you made a very valid point. So, I've had, I'm gonna say both men and women cheat before I say what I'm about to say. But I've had friends in the past, and it will always kind of like be like a running joke. So they would have like what we consider to be the perfect spouse, like caring, loving, supportive. Was good looking, everything you could possibly think you would want in a spouse, and they still find a reason to cheat. But it's like you said, simply people just do it because they want to do it. Even though I feel that way, I did come up with some different reasons of my own on why I think people do it. But honestly, I feel like there's no excuse or no cop out for doing it. It's wrong all across the board, in my opinion. But one of the first reasons I put on there is some people just aren't loyal in general. There are people that cheat on everybody that they've ever been with. I'm not lying. That's the truth.
That's
For some
true.
people, it's just in their DNA. They get bored easily or whatever the case may have you, right? The other reason I put is some people do it because maybe they're simply unhappy. And instead of getting themselves out of that relationship and trying something new, they just stay in it and they're unhappy, and then it leads to cheating. Um, other reason I put on here is maybe that person is hurt. People do some really strange things when they're heartbroken or they experience some type of pain or grief, and that leads a lot of people down the path of cheating. However, again, I'm not condoning it. I don't think it's right. I think for me personally, I think cheating is a cop out, but that's just my own. That's just from the mind of Marcus. That's my own opinion.
You know, they say hurt people hurt people.
I swear, you must be. Are you reading my? I think you read my stuff.
I am not.
But that's what I put to is hurt people hurt people. The next question I have for you is what are your thoughts on long distance relationships?
Well, in today's time and ages with technology, it's definitely a lot easier than it was in times past because now you have FaceTime and you have Zoom and Skype or whatever technology you have to be able to have have face-to-face conversations. So I guess it just depends on the individual. Um, Me, I am a person who likes to spend time with the person that I'm seeing. So I wouldn't necessarily want a long distance relationship for a long period of time.
So for me, as far as a long distance relationship, same thing like you said, we have different avenues and ways to communicate with people. I think it depends on how committed the two people are, and if they really want to pursue that. Me personally, I'm not a long distance relationship type of guy. Like you said, I want to be around my significant other. I want to be able to see her face every day and you know get breakfast, all that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't necessarily be into it, but I think it's one of those things when we talked about initially the communication and trust. Those have to be factors on why a person would I guess continue to have a long distance relationship. Um, when do you know it's time to let go of a relationship when it comes to dating?
Oh my. When
Oh yeah, she
it's
said, "Oh my, that's why."
um, when it becomes toxic.
Okay.
When it becomes toxic, then you know it's time to let go. When you're no longer happy, you know, and let me just kind of back up a little bit when I say when you no longer become happy, because I don't want people to think just because, you run into a bump in the road that today I'm not happy, that means to go. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying
Mhm.
is when you've given your all, if this is something that you truly want to pursue and you've given your all, and that just is not good enough, and now it's just time to go, because life is just too short to be trying to make something happen that's not there. Um, One of the things that I tell people when I'm speaking with them, don't be in the business of holding on to somebody that don't want to be held on to.
Oh man,
Move
you
on.
struck a nerve right there.
So yes, and definitely when it comes to a place where you're tearing down each other, either way, male or female, when you're tearing down one another and tearing down self-esteem and things like that, it's just time to let go.
So, do you think? All right. So you mentioned about basically knowing when to let go. Do you think a lot of people? I know I asked you the other question, but I gotta ask this question too. Do you feel like a lot of people just simply don't know when to let go, or they just hold on because maybe that's their norm, or they got used to being in a relationship, so it's kind of like a comfort zone?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that sometimes, and I'll speak from a woman's perspective, that sometimes we as women, we get into relationships and for whatever reason, you know, we're dealing with self-esteem issues. And we'll stay in this relationship, even though it's not a good relationship for us, but we'll stay there trying to hope that something would change. And a lot of times, I believe, again, these are just my opinions, that people are not just afraid to let go, but they feel like they can't do any better, or um, they just feel stuck. Sometimes people feel stuck, especially if they're living together. Now they're thinking, okay, well, now I have to move. Now everything falls on me versus, someone doing something for me, or someone splitting the bills, or whatever circumstances are. There's a lot of reasons that people stay in relationships that they shouldn't, but we have to take the initiative to just do what's best for us, for all parties in the situation.
Right, right. I think like basically what you said is, when it's got to a point where it's unhealthy, um, and like you said, you're no longer happy. But the
Mhm.
other side of it is, I thought about when you said you basically name a bunch of different reasons why a person would stay in a relationship, right? Another one of those reasons might be, what if the two individuals have kids together?
Well, I don't feel like anyone should stay in a relationship because they have kids, because at the end of the day, you're going to start transferring that energy to those kids. And at some point, those kids are going to grow up and they're going to realize that those two people were not happy, that their parents weren't happy.
Right.
And you don't want to create a space or a place either. I may be going a little bit too deep here, but you don't want to create
Oh
a
no, no,
place.
dive right in. Water's
uh,
just fine.
create a space and a place for a kid to start blaming themselves for their parents' unhappiness because they stayed for them. You don't
So
want to transfer that.
that kind of goes into basically having like healthy relationships as well,
Yes.
and what you project on other people, being your kids. um I've known other, like, people around my generation, my age or whatever, that they had parents and their parents wasn't in the ideal situation, right? And so now, subconsciously, or even actually, that relationship is now manifested on them as an adult. And so they
Hmm.
have some of those same characteristics and traits when they get in a relationship with somebody else.
Yes.
Um, what would you tell your younger self today about dating? If you could go back then and talk to yourself, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself to take my time. I would tell my younger self to date. You know, what I think what people, at least in my generation, when we were dating, we kind of had the impression that, we were dating, but the person that we were dating was supposed to be our boyfriend.
Mhm.
Whereas dating truly is just dating. It's data. It's gathering information about this person. This person may or may not be right for you, and it's okay. And I want to make sure that I emphasize dating does not mean sex. I want to
Mhm.
make sure that people understand that you can date multiple people, but that does not mean that you're having sex with multiple people.
All right.
So I would tell my younger self to just date, collect information, take your time. You have plenty of time to get married. Back in the 50s and 60s, that was the goal. You wanted to be married and have kids. That's not something that you have to rush into. You have your whole life for that. I would tell my younger self, you're going to be dealt some curveballs, but trust and believe those curveballs will make you a stronger woman, and you will appreciate those things that you've gone through.
Okay. I would tell my younger self is one, don't be in a rush to grow up so fast.
Hmm.
Probably the first thing I tell myself. And then, I think the other thing I would tell myself is just be careful with the people you allow in your heart, the people you allow in your life. Um, because life, sometimes it's like the harshest teacher. And, in the short time I've been on the earth, I've been in some good situations, some bad situations, but they're all learning situations. And, I think I would probably tell myself not to be so quick to be so trusting so fast.
Yes.
To figure that person out first and see what their intentions are for you, if they're whether they're good or bad, and then operate in that space based off that. I think my generation of people were so quick to, tell somebody we love them or, enter into a serious relationship. I do, in my own opinion, instead of just, hey, like you said, like you're dating, you're gaining data about that person to see if something can form to be serious out of that relationship. But another thing you made me think about, you said people in the 50s, right?
Hmm.
So I have this theory, and then you could tell me what you think about it. So, do you think? All right, so back then, obviously, it was a different time, different day and age, right? I always say that my grandparents were like to me like the model idea of love, right? Because no matter what they went through, they always stayed together, right? And I say that those people, of that day and age, they had a different type of love than we do now. However, I used to always ask questions like, well, do you think they loved each other? Not my grandparents in general, because I know my grandfather, my grandmother, they loved each other. Um, Matter of fact, my grandmother, after my grandfather died, she never dated or talked to anybody else. But just thinking about that time frame, right? Do you think it was more of a love thing or a necessity thing?
Ooh, geesh. I think that could be a combination.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I've seen, like you said, that true love that, where grandma and grandpa was together, and, they rode the waves, they went through the storms and just handled everything that came their way. And I've also seen those where they were together, they rode the waves, but Papa was a Rolling Stone.
All right.
So it can be, it can go both ways sometimes, because back then women were basically stay at home moms and they took care of the house and all of that. They didn't have the finances to be able to go out and do things on their own. So they were, quote unquote, stuck in those situations. So again, that can go both ways. It just kind of depends on those two individuals.
Okay. Okay. I agree. I think it's love and necessity, but I
Hmm.
also look at the dynamics of the household. So my grandmother and my grandfather, they had a lot of children. And it was in Nashville, Mississippi. And I don't know if you know a whole lot about Mississippi, but my mama
I'm
gonna
from
be.
Mississippi.
Are you from? Oh my! What part of Mississippi?
Holly Springs.
Hot Springs. Okay, I'm from Jackson. So
Okay, two and
so
a half
now,
hours
now,
away.
now only you on here as a guest. Now we kinfolk now. So look, all right. So I'm from Jackson. My mom was born and raised in Fayette, Mississippi, right?
Okay.
Um, Much different than where I'm from. Jackson's way different. I'm not beating your city up, mom, because I know my mom was watching this before I say this. I'm just making it a point. So, growing up in the country, I would imagine from the stories my mom told me that their family dynamic was a little different, right? So, you got my grandfather. He was a hardworking man. He didn't get to finish high school because he dropped out of school so he can make sure he provided for his family, right? And then that kind of goes back into what we're saying about a different type of love, right? I feel like a lot of people now, they wouldn't necessarily do that for their family. And like I said, the day and age was different. So I felt like from listening to my mom, the type of love they had as a both as a family, but then as husband and wife was just it was different. Not saying it was better, but I feel like the bond was much stronger. Just my own opinion.
Yeah. No, I agree. I definitely agree with you. It was definitely a stronger bond. I mean, just think about it. Back then, you didn't have, and I know we're going to talk about parents and children
Mhm.
later, but you didn't have children not talking to their parents because they were mad. I haven't talked to my mom in 10 years. Where they do that at?
Not
So
in Mississippi.
right, so it's just stuff like that. So I definitely agree with you on that, that the bonds was definitely stronger.
Okay. Now we're gonna dive right into the parenting. What do you feel effective parenting in your own words or your own opinion looks like?
Again, it to me, it's about communication. Um, and I definitely cannot leave out discipline. The word says, "Spare the rod, spoil the child," and I
Absolutely.
believe in discipline. I'm not saying beating. I'm saying discipline.
Because that is much
Um,
different.
that is very different. Beating is what we see on the media with these billy clubs and police brutality. That's not, that's what I want to prevent my kids from having to go through. I don't need the streets trying to beat sense into them. I want to provide them with the sense that they need before they go into the streets.
Okay. Me, I'm gonna say respect and love. And the
Definitely respect.
reason why I say that is because I think I also come from an era where parents are trying to be more of their children's friend than being their parents.
Hmm.
I actually had this conversation with my mom on the way here this morning, right? And I asked her, I was like, well, what do you think is more important, being a parent or a friend, right? Now, obviously, my mom's gonna say being a parent. Um,
Of course.
Now, I would say the same thing, right? And then I'm gonna let you, give your opinion. But I said parenting, I said parent first, but I also feel like a lot of the reason why me and my mom had a great relationship we do is because she was my friend too. I always parent first,
Mhm.
but she made it inviting for me to be able to tell her, what was going on in my life. So I didn't have to hide anything from her.
Mhm.
So I think it's a balance. Obviously, yeah, you're always gonna be the parent. But if you're so stern that your kids are not willing to open up to you, there's gonna be a lot of stuff you miss out on. And then you wind up having those kids where you were so strict or so stern the whole time you made yourself non-approachable. And now they're doing everything under the sun behind your back because they don't feel comfortable enough talking to you. How you feel about that?
I definitely agree with that. I definitely believe in parenting first. Um, Unlike your mom, though, I was not my children's friend, but big ups to your mom on that. I actually applaud that and can appreciate that now as an adult. But now my kids are definitely my friends. We sit on the phone literally for hours, and sometimes we're just on the phone, not even talking about anything, just hearing each other breathe. So, so
All
I can definitely tell you that I was strict in a sense of where I didn't allow my children to go like spend the night at people's houses or anything like that, but they were free enough to be able to go out and enjoy themselves, and they had a place where they could come talk to me, and I would talk to them about certain things or just about pretty much anything, regardless of how uncomfortable it is. But I was definitely a parent first, and I made sure that they knew that.
Okay. How do you what from your own parents, right? What type of influence do you think your own parents have had on you and your parenting skills or style as you've grown up?
Oh, definitely very influential, because my parents were, the strict parent as well. But that goes kind of two ways because there are some things that I definitely, well, I shouldn't say I didn't learn, but I learned whether they did it or not do it. So as far as the rearing, definitely got that. But there was also things like My parents were not at like I was in sports in school, so my
Mhm.
parents weren't there because they were working. And for me, when my children were in sports, I made sure that I was at every event that they had because I didn't have that. So it influenced me, you know, in the opposite way than what they
Okay.
did.
So my parents, obviously, because I've talked about my mom, my dad. I have a great father too. Let me make sure I give a shout out to Larry McCoy. Huge influence in my life, right? My dad, I gotta tell you a funny story, right? Uh, so my dad's about, I don't know, he's probably about 6'3", 6'4", probably about like 240, right? He's like not a small guy, right? My dad whooped me one time in his life, one. All that shit was one time. But tell you what I did too, right? He had a, I don't know what kind of car it was, but it basically was like convertible, but it was a hard top where it had a little T in the middle and you pull the sides out, right?
Tea time.
Now I had never seen anything like this. This in the 80s. So I just thought it was so cool, right? So I wanted to stand up on the seat so I could catch like the wind. I wanted the wind to blow in my face, right? And I remember he told me to sit down. Now I don't think I heard him, right? Me personally. That's my
With too
story.
much
I
wind
swear
in your ears.
yeah. Dad, if you listen, I swear I didn't hear you. And man, next thing I know, man, he told my butt up. And I remember I told my mom when I went home, I was like, oh yeah, I don't ever want to go with that guy again. But that's the only time. Look, it only took one time. I saw he wasn't playing. He got me, and that was that. But I think I take a lot of both of my parents' personality in my own parenting. I kiss myself all the time telling my kids stuff that I know my mom and dad told me when I was growing up. And, you know, it makes no sense when you're little, but now it make all the sense in the world.
Yep.
I'm like, man, I kiss myself. I said, man, I sound like my parents. But I think the biggest thing I took from them is not only loving my children, but being available for my children. I think one of the greatest
That's
things you
awesome.
can do in any relationship is be available.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of kids out here that don't, they have a single parent household. They don't have, this side of the spectrum. Um, I was fortunate. I was blessed to be able to have, both of my parents, and even to this day, they're still in my ear. Another thing about my parents too, even though I'm grown, I still don't want to disappoint them, if
Hmm.
that makes sense. Not that I'm, looking for validation, but it always feels good to know that I'm making my parents proud in what I'm doing now as an adult. So I think I try to transfer like some of that energy on my kids too. Not saying that, they have to be perfect or anything, but just knowing like, hey, look, I'm here, I'm supportive. Um, my kids, same thing. I play sports. My dad, so I got it from my dad, right? So my mom's not athletic at all. I love her, but she ain't athletic, right? But she make the best peach cobbler this side of the Mississippi River, I swear, right? But my dad's super athletic, right? So he got me into sports, and my dad was my high school basketball coach, right? At the time, I hated it, right? Because I had to deal with him in practice, right? And I told him this story too, so it's not like nothing unknown. I had to deal with him in practice, and I had to deal with him at home, right? And what I found is he would be pushing me. I felt like he was pushing me too hard in practice, right? But what I found out later on is all he was doing is he was giving me tools, life tools that I could use when I become an adult. Like not quitting on yourself, believing in yourself, all that type of thing. But I didn't realize it at the time. I just felt like, man, here's my dad. He's my high school basketball coach, and he's just being hard on me just because he can do it. I always had to run more than everybody else. I had to always do more suicide drills than everybody else. But that's also where I got a lot of my drive and my determination from, is from him and my mom instilling that in me when I was young.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Um, Next question I have is what are some things that are taught enforced in parenting that may be hurting our kids?
Uh, I think one of the things is not being able to truly communicate. Um, I I know like the saying is children should be heard, seen and not heard, and that's not, in my opinion, not necessarily the best approach.
Mm,
Um, like I said, I'm a firm believer in discipline and all of that. And I also believe there's a time and place for everything. But I think when we don't allow our children to communicate with us, that is a huge problem. Um, I don't know. I just feel like when I was growing up in our era, that our parents said what they said, and that was it. There was no questioning what it was that they said. So it was what they said. That was it. Now go somewhere and sit down. Whereas now,
Oh, you from Mississippi? Go somewhere and sit down, man. Let me tell you.
Yeah. So I think that would be one of the things that I would say. But in today's era, I think parents just try to give their children too much. You want to try to give them things that you didn't have, and that's okay to a certain extent. But we have to be able to find that that compromise. There's a fine line between making them self-sufficient and just doing and giving.
Mm-hmm. So my thing is, and this just goes from some experience I have on what I think is parents. Some of the things parents are doing to hurt children is for this is specifically what I'm gonna say is for young black males in general is you grow up and everybody's telling you don't cry or that didn't hurt, and I feel like I think a lot of young black males are missing certain emotional skills and social skills because you're basically being taught that crying or showing your emotions is a sign of weakness when it's really not. I mean, think about how many people probably gone through this life and they were hurting or upset as a child, and now they have years just built on frustration that they're holding up, right, or pinning up, and then God forbid some crazy scenario happens and then they explode because they haven't had the time over that span of life that they had to actually get that out and express that to other people.
Yeah. Well, let me just tell you this. I'm just gonna give you a statistic and just tell you that untreated childhood trauma causes mental health illness in adults. So and I'm gonna speak like you just said on Black youth or Black men or just Black people, period. When we have to bottle up everything, that's trauma. When we've been traumatized by something and can't address it and it's held inside of us, that's doing something to our mental and to our physical. We have to be able to communicate and have an outlet. There was this thing where in our culture where they would always say, if you were seeing a therapist, you were crazy. Well, we need to get rid of that stereotype as well. There is nothing wrong with seeking therapy if you need it, because there's going to be some things that I'll just say my kids may be going through that I can't help them with. But if there's a licensed professional that can assist them, baby, get all the treatment that you need to get the help that you need to be successful and a productive citizen. We need to get rid of those stereotypes. Then I also want to kind of go back and address with the Black men. I didn't necessarily want to say this, but since you honed in on Black men, we also have to be mindful, Black men, that making a baby don't make you a daddy. You can't go make a baby and then want to go on to the next woman and then take care of her kids because you're living with her, but not taking care of the ones that you fathered. Absolutely. We need to do better with that.
So on that, all right. So now on that, right? On the same token as that, right? How do you feel like? I mean, because at the end of the day, it's obviously an individual thing within that man to want to take care of his own children, right? But what do you think could be something that would, I don't know, maybe like foster a culture where we have more? And it's not saying that obviously there's a lot of men that don't take care of their kids. That's a real thing, right? But what do you think we could do to foster a culture where we have less of that and more of the father being active in that child's life?
Well, I hate to give a justification or what one would consider a justification. But I think that there's a lot of times, as much as we, at least in my generation, in my culture, my generation, we're in the same culture.
I hope
And
we're in the same culture. We're from the same place.
in my generation, we had this whole thing about, like the TV and the music. We didn't really feel that was influential, right? But
It
now
really is.
it really is. What you listen to, what you watch, what you allow in your ear gates, and what you allow in your eye gates is what you're going to portray. So if we can see more, we had the Huxtables when in my era growing up. I don't know how old you are. So, we had the Cosby Show. So we had,
I'm old
on
enough to have
TV.
watched the Cosby's.
Okay, well, great. So we had, a positive Black family on television that we could see and that we could strive to be, have that family, that family environment. But in reality, if we as a community, if we just started just coming together, back in the day, in our parents' days, they used to say it takes a village. It takes a village. Now you say something to somebody's kid, the kid want to fight you, the mama want to fight you, and the grandmama want to fight you.
Oh, you ain't never lied about that. That's the truth.
So we have to just do better as people with fostering better relationships, better respect. Back, back in the day, you couldn't catch a teenager out cursing in front of their elder. Now you walk outside, you walk down the sidewalk, they not moving, they cussing and cussing you out because you walking between them. So it starts with it. I'm gonna first say it starts at home with trying to gain that respect back, and then outside of the home, and then let's just as people come together, and it just starts. It has to start somewhere. Maybe if it's just a community group, just get together and just say, you know what, let's start a mentorship program for young mothers, start a mentorship for young fathers, and go from there.
So just a caveat to that, I do definitely agree that it takes a village. That was actually something we talked about on my first podcast, what happened to the concept it takes a village to raise a child, because I also grew up in that era. But like you said, like the culture is so jacked up where like these kids just feel like they can say or do anything. My son went to this local high school here, right? He graduated already. But I remember I used to go to his football games, and we'd be standing in line at the concession stand to go get something. And I'm talking about these kids just out here cussing up a storm. I'm talking about like it's a gang of adults around them, like so they know. And I'm talking about they just bump this, bump that. I'm like, oh my God. So me, I'm one of those type of parents and just a adult in general. And you can't do that around me. Like if you, whether you my kid or not, I'm finna check that at the door, because I feel like that's the reason why they feel comfortable doing, because somebody else is allowing that behavior to happen. So I remember I asked one of the young men who was cussing, like I was like, hey man, like you do that around your parents? And he was like, no sir. I said, so why do you feel so comfortable with you doing that? The kid was like in the 5th grade.
Wow.
I'm like, so it's getting younger and younger. And then the other side of that is, I always say, like, this is the future of the free world, are these kids right here. And if we don't get a hold of them now and start implementing some change, then the world and people who live in the world are we're gonna be in trouble, because they don't have, a lot of them don't have self-respect, they don't have value, they don't value authority, any of that type of stuff. Which brings me into the next thing. So I think it was on Saturday. Yeah, it was Saturday. So Saturday we partnered with this organization called Fly Event Promotions. Shout out to Fly Event Promotions. And what they did was they had this basically it was an event called Plant a Seed and It Will Grow, right? So they had local community organizations. They had the local police department come out, and they had like face painting, a bunch of different other things for kids to do, right? But I thought it was cool because you got to see organizations that don't necessarily like work together for a common goal. And the great thing about it for me as a man, there were a lot of men there, positive men there.
Yeah.
So, maybe I don't know the dynamics of the children, but maybe those children don't have a strong father in life, or maybe the father is absent in general. But I thought it was great because they got to see an example of, strong men and women in the community, working together and, trying to create, positive change. So I thought that was really cool, just from my own standpoint to see.
And that's a great start.
And I think we need more of that. We need more of these type conversations to be able to influence the change. One of the things we talked about with the police officers is their relationship, like the community relationships, right? And they were just like, there's certain things they're not necessarily taught how to how do I say it? They're not necessarily taught how to interact with with the public.
Yeah.
Other than just doing
and with our culture.
Yeah, definitely with our culture. And so, my fear as a parent, especially being a Black male, I have, older son, but I have four kids total, but three young men, right? Black men. And my fear is always that, they're gonna get arrested by the wrong cop. And because we're such a threat in their eyes, even though we haven't necessarily done anything wrong, that my son might not make it home just because of that cop's fear or and so how you feel about that?
Well, that it is scary because we are the only culture that has to teach our children, when you get pulled over by a police officer, make sure you comply, do what he say do, make sure your hands are visible, don't make any sudden moves, don't do this, don't do that. We are the only culture that have to train our children that way. And it's sad because growing up, you are taught that the police are to serve and protect you, that you should be safe around police. But now we've been trained to be fearful of the police.
Absolutely.
And that, like I said, is scary. And it's funny that you brought that up, because I was literally just thinking about this the other day. I was trying to understand, why is it that they are so fearful of Black men or Black people in general, police officers that is. And I'm really not sure, other than the stereotype. And I think it also has something to do with the psyche of when they're going to gun ranges. The target is Black.
So you think it's kind of a subconscious thing too?
Yeah. I mean, I'm shooting at a Black target when I'm shooting. So now I see Black, even though, we're not Black, we're brown, but that becomes a threat to them. So until they can train themselves that all Black people are not a threat, and there's some type of true training, and they're getting out community engaging, then we're going to continue to have a problem.
Right. I definitely agree with that. So another question I have for you is, as far as so I don't know, what are the dynamics? Do you have like a daughter and a son, or just one specific sex?
I have two daughters. My son passed away last year.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And I'm a blended family. So I have a stepson as well, but he lives out of state. But yeah, those are still things that you have to teach.
All right. Do you feel like with your parenting dynamic, do you parent your daughters, or have you parented your daughters different than you parented your son?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I know a lot of women are probably going to disagree with me on this, but I just feel like as a parent, that we teach our daughters, we can teach our daughters how to become women, right? We can teach them, to do the things that we as women should be doing. But if you are a single mom, I feel like at a certain age that young man needs to be with his father. I can't teach a young man how to become a man. I can teach him how to treat a woman, but I can't teach him how to be a man. There are some things and some skills that I can give him, yes, but I cannot teach him how to be a man. He needs that male in his life.
All right. So for me, I definitely parent my daughter different than I parent my sons. The love is the same, but
Hmm.
the parenting is different because you got me. I'm supposed to be as a male. I'm supposed to be the first. I'm supposed to be the first male that my daughter falls in love with. It's supposed to be me.
Absolutely.
And so because I know that, and I know I had to be nurturing and not saying I'm not doing it with my sons, but a lot of times some things with my sons are more of a tough love. Not saying they can't
Hmm.
express or have feelings, but but again it goes back to what you were saying. We know what kind of environment that it is for black children, right? So there are certain conversations I have with my sons, and my daughter's the youngest too. She's the baby. That's another part of it.
Oh
They went to speaking of them. They went today was my kids' first day of school. Oh my God,
no, already?
we so glad they out the house. Jesus, man, it was a long summer. But anyway, that's off the topic. But with my sons, I'm still nurturing. But again, there are certain conversations I have with them. Like one thing my kids do that I just absolutely hate, and it's got to do with having being older and then having a younger sibling. Is I don't feel like they protect my daughter enough when it comes to certain stuff, right? Like
Like
they
what?
get like well, so my oldest son is in my house is 13, right?
Okay.
And then the next one is 11, and my daughter is 8, right? So my 13-year-old son, I feel like there's just certain things he know he should be looking out for his sister on, right? Like if she's gonna do something, it's gonna cause her eventually to hurt herself or fall or something like that, And they're always, they're little kids, so they're always bickering about stuff. But I try to impart on them that at the end of the day, you're gonna look around one day and your parents not gonna be here. And all y'all gonna have, unless in a relationship with somebody else, is each other. So it's best, you love each other, you care about each other now. Now I'm not gonna lie, like me and my sister, she probably watching too. Like we used
Hey,
to go,
sister.
yeah, hey Shay, if you watching, hey, we used to go tooth and nail, and we used to argue about the craziest stuff. So we didn't have no phones or nothing. We had, regular rotary phone. We didn't have cell phones yet. So man, I remember we used to argue all the time about who was gonna be on the phone. Sibling love, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I think that's another reason why I try to stop my kids from doing stuff like that too. Because at the end of the day, when you get older, like right now, my folks they still live in Mississippi. I'm out here in El Paso, Texas. But I miss a lot of that brotherly sister interaction with my own siblings. So I try to make sure that I tell my own kids, like, hey, look, enjoy this time while you have it. Because when you get grown and you scatter to the four winds of the earth, you're not gonna be able to just, drive right over and be with your siblings. So that time is important. Um, what are your aspirations for your own children?
Um, I just want my children to be happy, healthy, and just accomplish whatever goals it is that they set forth for themselves. Um, just be loving individuals. Just do what makes you happy, unapologetically. Don't put any limits on yourselves. You have you can do and be whatever it is that you want to do and be, and that's really, as if they're happy and healthy individuals, then I'm happy and healthy.
I would say I'm still in what you just said. Everything you said just before now would be the same thing for me. Um, but I feel like I just want my kids to know that whatever they do, they're supported by me. You know what I'm saying? I told like my daughter, she watched when the vice president was sworn in, right? Which was like the coolest thing ever, right? Because now she sees and everybody sees that there's no limit to what anybody can accomplish, especially
Yeah.
being a person of color. Because hey, look, the White House is speaking for itself. So I just want them to, whatever it is, the dreams they have or the aspirations, I want them to shoot for them. I want them to know that they can accomplish them. I want to be happy, healthy. I want them to be wealthy, but not famous. Because you're famous, you can't live your own life. You got
Yeah.
everybody in. But if they're wealthy and nobody knows them, then they could,
That's a good point.
yeah, living a great life and doing what they do. Um, Before we get out of here, I wanted to ask you this question. So we talked a lot about different aspects of relationships, from dating, marriage, and just the parent-child relationship, right? But if there's one thing you could leave the listeners with right now that you want to impart on them before we get out of there, what would it be?
Um, Anything or just relationship based?
Anything.
I would tell the listeners to live your best life. One of the biggest things that I am big on, especially even now, is to know if you are living or if you are existing.
Mm-hmm.
If you are existing, then you need to get to living. If you don't know the difference, then are you adding years to your life or are you adding life to your years? If you can answer that, then you'll know if you're living or existing.
I like that right there. You know what? Me and you, we're gonna talk a whole lot. I think for me, what I want to impart on the listeners is, um, just value the relationships you have. I'm gonna say this over and over again because I got a little old spirit in me, and I hear a lot of people say it. But some people are only in your life for a season, right? You determine how long that season is gonna be for that person. And hopefully for some, it's longer for some, and then it's shorter for the people that don't need to be in your life. But just take care of your relationship, take care of your mental health, make sure you're involved in healthy, productive relations.
Yes.
You know, you want to have people in your corner that want to see you win. And I feel like people that want to see you win, they're quite naturally gonna show you that they want you to win. So just fostering healthy relationships and don't get in your own way when it comes to relationship. Sometimes I think we could be like our worst and biggest enemy because there could be something good that we're holding back ourselves because some sense of fear or whatever the case may be. Um, but I definitely want to thank you for coming on the show today. It was a pleasure talking to you. Um,
Likewise.
yeah, I didn't know I didn't know you was from Mississippi before, so now again I feel we cousins.
All right, cuz.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I want to tell the listeners, I definitely thank you guys for tuning in to the show. Join me next month, and we kind of mentioned it before, but we're gonna have a part two to friendship. But until then, El Paso, it's been real.